तव कथामृतं तप्तजीवनं कविभिरीडितं कल्मषापहं श्रवणमङ्गलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. We begin with a song today, which is part of today's conversation, and then we'll play the song again when we discuss that song which was sung by Sri Ramakrishna.
डूब 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 रूप सागरे
So this song will be coming at the end of this conversation. It's a famous song sung by a poet known as Kubir. We do not know, it's definitely not the Kabir whom we know. It's another Kubir, a Bengali saint, obviously because the song is in Bengali. And this was sung by Sri Ramakrishna to explain to Pratap, who was facing some issues with the Brahmo Samaj. He was one of the preachers, as you know, and he was discussing about many things. And in the last conversation we saw, he is telling Sri Ramakrishna that he has just come back from a visit to England and America, and he makes a comment. If you remember, last time we mentioned that, he just mentions that Sri Ramakrishna had asked him, in fact, you went to England, what did you see there? Do tell me about it. Sri Ramakrishna was very curious. So Pratap makes a very sweeping statement, and Sri Ramakrishna does not like it. So he corrects him, very gently he corrects him. In the West, people are worshippers of what you call gold. Of course, he must have visited England when people were obviously not involving themselves in too much of spiritual life as such. But generally speaking, he says, Pratap, from one end to the other, activity reigned supreme there. So England was at the height of its glory in those days, ruling so many countries. Naturally, they were so busy. And it is the same in America. Still, there are some good people, some who are unattached to worldly life. So that was his view. But then Sri Ramakrishna immediately corrects, and it says, it is not true that attachment to worldly work is found in the West. It's all over the world. It's not specific to any particular region. That's what Sri Ramakrishna says, though he had never traveled and gone out of India. In fact, he had gone to very few places other than Kolkata. Maybe he had gone to Banaras and some places like Devghar, which Mathurnath had arranged for him. But somehow he did not like Pratap making such a generalized statement. And then he says, it explains the reason. And do you know why? Work is the first stage of life. So he just does not dismiss that there are only people who work only with the motive of earning money or with some attachment to lust and greed, as Sri Ramakrishna often used to warn. So he is trying to correct Pratap that all people don't work with that motive. Some of them work with the different reasons. All people who work are not worldly. So that's why he says it's a first stage of life. And he says, though God cannot be realized without devotion, discrimination, dispassion, kindness and the like, the very nature of work involves a person in worldly activities, so it brings a darkness with it. So that is the natural trend which is associated with work. And Sri Ramakrishna says darkness means tamas. He has used the word tamas in Bengali, the tamo guna or tamas. So anything that has to do with material things naturally gravitate the mind towards those things and make it gross. So the grosser a mind is, the more tamo guna is to be found associated with it. But work also has another aspect, that is rajoguna, activity. And without that, as Swamiji said so many times, especially referring to the tamasic ignorance which he found in India, he said it's first necessary to be active, develop some kind of rajas which is slightly better than tamas, and then aspire for a sattvic life. That's why, though Sri Ramakrishna says, he says here, too much work makes one forget God, because we are away from sattva and leads to greater attachment to lust and greed. However, you see the next paragraph, he says, but is it possible, though this is the ideal case, especially those who aspire for spirituality, but can we possibly give up work altogether? So he says, not possible to give up work all of a sudden, which is also explained in the 3rd chapter and also in 2nd chapter of the Gita, where Sri Ramakrishna praises the path of knowledge, or bhakti in this case here. They are not much different actually. But Sri Krishna also tells that though work is not the way, but for you, Arjuna, the work is the only way, because you have to refine the rajas within you, convert it into sattva, and when you get that sattva guna, then it is possible to transcend it and get attached to spirituality. So he says, however, it is not possible to give up work all of a sudden, and neither is it desirable. Your nature will lead you to do it whether you want to or not. That is what Sri Krishna tells in the Gita, exactly the same words. He says, even if you decide, after listening to me, after listening to the glory of the Spirit, if you decide, still you cannot give up your swadharma, because your very nature, that is your very prakriti makes you do certain things depending on the proportion of the 3 gunas which are within you: tamasic guna, tamo guna, sattva guna, and rajasic guna. So rajo guna. So all these 3 gunas, various permutations and combinations, decide our swadharma, and that swadharma makes us act whether we like it or not. Our swadharma will make us work in a particular way. Somebody else's swadharma will make him work in a particular. So the method of one person is not the method of another. That's what Sri Ramakrishna is telling. And she says, so the instruction is, if at all you have to work because of the preponderance of tamo guna or rajo guna, try to do it without attachment, because if you do without attachment, that's the whole message of the Gita, in fact. How to perform detached work. Chapter 3, chapter 4, chapter 5, Karma Sannyasa Yoga also speaks about the same thing, how to work and at the same time not be attached to that work. That's the entire secret which Sri Krishna explains in all the 18 chapters of the Bhagavad Gita. That's the main essence, theme. So work done without attachment means work done without any expectation of reward. Sri Ramakrishna is trying to explain now what does it mean to work without attachment. How can we plausibly work without attachment? Without attachment there can be no work. So really it means that you do not you do work without any expectation of what it really brings to you, what fruits you get as a result of that work. The fruits may be favorable, it may not be favorable. So if you are attached to the fruits, then you are attached to the work. If you are not attached to the fruit, naturally you will do the work with the same excellence with which you would have done if you are expecting a reward. But at the same time you are free. You will be doing that work as a free person, not as a bound person. A bound person does work like a slave. As Swamiji says, we are slaves to duty. We give it a wonderful name, but actually we are slaves to duty. The same duty, if you consider or if you do it with freedom. So freedom is one of the important qualities which helps you. Freedom in the mind, freedom of the spirit, or freedom at all levels help you to work without attachment or without expectation of reward. For example, he says, even repeating the name of God, the Nam Japa which we do, is also a kind of work. It involves some kind of mental activity. Though some people may not repeat the name of the God loudly, but many times repeating the name of God is done loudly, like Nam Sankirtan. There are certain traditions where the Mahamantra, like Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So it's a tradition in their faith to do this Nama Japa very loudly and very often in chorus. So these things are done in various ways. So even repeating the name of God is work. Religious austerities, different types of puja which we do. But if we don't do it, of course these pujas and these rituals can be done with the hope to get some reward. We have certain difficulties or we wish to attain certain we wish to gain something from worldly gain, we aspire for some worldly gain and we do it. So religious austerities can also be done with that purpose, but he is not speaking of that. But if that worship or that repetition of the name of God and the religious austerities, if they are not done for any kind of recognition or for earning some merit, then it is a work without attachment. Now, working unattached in this way is called karma yoga. But he says, but it is very difficult. In the Kali Yuga, attachment creeps in so easily. You may resolve to work without attachment, but attachment enters from somewhere and you don't know from where. Say you have celebrated a big holy feast or served a number of paupers, lot of people, you are feeding them, poor people. You may have thought, I am doing all this without any attachment. Yet the desire for name and fame, when people praise you for the wonderful charitable work you have done, a subtle desire for name and fame, for glory comes from somewhere unseen. Thus, it is only possible for those who have seen God to be completely unattached. So, throughout the gospel, if you see, Sri Ramakrishna is mainly talking to householders who even otherwise would have done this work, even if he had prohibited them, because they were all having certain duties. For example, Pratap himself is involved in some dispute where he is doing some preaching, and there are some administrative problems after the passing away of Keshav Sen, which is being discussed now. So he has to work, he has to see that the Brahmo Samaj runs properly, day-to-day administration and other things. But another devotee there, perhaps not Pratap himself, is asking another question. When Sri Ramakrishna says that unless one sees God, it is not possible to be completely unattached. So that means, should we not do work till then, till we see God? So that is a non-natural question. What is the way for those who have not seen God? Should they renounce all worldly work? If they can't do it unattached, the question asked by these devotees, suppose we don't realize God, so that we can't work unattached at all. So should we then give up all work, so that it's better not to do any work than getting attached? So Sri Ramakrishna, instead of giving a direct answer, he gives an alternative path. He says, for the Kali Yuga, Bhakti Yoga is best suited. The path of love and devotion enjoined by Narada. Narada wrote his famous Bhakti Sutras, which I think you know. That was the book which inspired Sturdy also, and that was the first book which Swami Vivekananda helped him to translate when he came from Paris here. So Narada's way of divine love, it is more or less connected to the Christian tradition of prayer and devotion. So this devotion is an aspect which is common to all the religions, whether they are Semitic or who believe, whether even if they don't believe in a personal God, they believe in the Son of God or they believe in their prophet. So this devotion to the prophet or praying to the prophet is very easily understood by all religious traditions. But it is difficult to follow the path of jnana or karma, because these things are normally considered as supplementary to the path of devotion. All religions normally practice bhakti yoga. So Sri Ramakrishna is also saying the same thing, that it is easy to follow this path of love and devotion enjoined by Narada, because we involve all the three faculties. When we say we have a faculty to think, a faculty to we have a faculty of emotion which can be transmuted into love, and then we have the faculty to work or activity. We have the faculty to will. That willpower makes us do all sorts of activities. But still, the path of emotion or the path of love seems to be very easy. That's what Sri Ramakrishna feels in this Kali Yuga. So that's why he says, when one prays with a longing heart, O Lord, grant me knowledge and devotion, reveal yourself to me. Karma Yoga is very difficult in this age. That's why you must pray to God, O Lord, lessen my work. Now this is, you should remember, he's telling people, most of whom were inordinately attached to their work. They were so busy that they did not even get time to visit Dakshineshwar. So he is speaking to such people. You see, these people occasionally came to Sri Ramakrishna, and the main reason they could not come often was their too much of involvement in their work. So maybe keeping that in mind, he says, it is with that idea, Sri Ramakrishna says, if you at all you have to pray, you pray to him that you reduce the work so that I can spend more time in devotion and other things. Besides that, first of all, you lessen my work, and whatever work you have for me, may I by your grace be able to perform it without attachment. Now that is one part of it. But at the same time, grant that I may have no desire to engage myself in more work. The work which is already involving you and causing so much of impediment, you at least pray that if not more, I'll deal with what work has fallen to my lot, but at least don't increase it so that I may get more and more involved, engage myself more and more in. But it is not possible to give up work. To meditate, that too is work. This is a very important point he is making. It's the time you spend in real contemplation or real love which can be termed as devotion, not everything. All the ancillary things or the supplementary things that we do, the rituals, is also work. The effort we do to repeat japa or to do meditate and do all sorts of activities, that is also work according to Sri Ramakrishna. So even that has to be done without attachment. But when you have gained love for God, your worldly work decreases by itself, and then you don't like it anymore. Who likes water sweetened with molasses after having tasted water sweetened with sugar candy? So he is giving a beautiful example. Then the devotee still is asking this question because he has had experience of working with the Westerners, that is British, who were ruling us, and perhaps he found that to his dislike that they are making him work extra hours and put in so much of effort, because that's how they were ruling India at that time. So Westerners urge us to work more and more. That is what the devotee who is feeling that. Is work the aim of life? Sri Ramakrishna then immediately answers, the aim of life is to realize God. Work is only the first chapter of human life. It can't be the aim of life. Even selfless work, though we cannot avoid doing work, even selfless work is only a means to the goal and not the end. The end is to realize God. In this, as far as this particular thought was concerned, Sri Ramakrishna was very consistent. He did not change. He said the goal of life cannot be two. The goal of life is to realize God, to realize the self. But the means can be different according to the stage in which one finds oneself. According to his own stage of life, maybe some people begin with work because if they are still at the kindergarten of religion, then perhaps they have to pass through all these stages. So work is also a stage, it is the first chapter, and then, but it cannot be, definitely it cannot be the aim of life. That's, he is making it very clear here. Then we come to, he gives a wonderful example. Shambhucharan Malik was a very rich philanthropist, and he did lot of work. So he once came and he was so fond of charity that he wanted to do a lot of charitable work. So he asked for a strange kind of blessing. He said, please bless me that the money I have may be spent on good causes in building hospitals, dispensaries, roads, wells and so on. Then Thakur immediately told him, he is talking of an earlier conversation which took place. So he says, it's good to do all this work unattached, but it is very difficult. You must always remember in whatever you do that the aim of human life is to attain God, not to build hospitals and dispensaries. Suppose God appears before you. This is a very unique way of explaining to him. Suppose tomorrow God appears before you and tells you to ask for a boon. Will you ask him to build some hospitals and dispensaries for you? Just think of it. It's a very simple thing, but Sri Ramakrishna explains to us, see, this is what worldly people, they get misguided. Or will you say to him, O Lord, grant me pure love at your lotus feet, may I see you always. Hospitals, dispensaries and so on are all transient things. Now this is known as Nitya Nitya Vastu Vivek. Along with prayer, along with devotion, along with satsang or holy company, used to always emphasize on trying to always discriminate between the permanent and the transient. No amount of temporary things can solve our problems permanently, and a wise man always wants an eternal solution for his problems, temporary or permanent. Our problems seem to be temporary, but they are following each other in such a sequence, such a unending sequence, that they look like eternal. So sometimes the human soul, in the human soul there is a call, like what happened to Buddha. He saw there are these small problems like old age, death and sickness, and so many problems he saw in life. And then he saw it's not just one problem, one follows the other in sequence. So the problems, though they may be temporary, but since their sequence is unending, you may say the problems are also eternal. So to solve the eternal problems, there has to be an eternal solution. That's why Sri Ramakrishna says God is the only reality, and that is where every religion ends. They say since the only reality is God, who is eternal, who is unlimited, who is infinite in every way, so only that infinite God or infinite reality or that eternal existence can solve our limited or temporary problems. So that is why all and so on, these hospitals, dispensaries, though they are more sustainable or more long lasting than maybe a chocolate or a small toffee which you eat and then it's over, it's just a temporary, the temporary nature or the transient nature of sweets and all those things is obvious to even children. They know that this pleasure is not going to last long. But dispensaries and hospitals, which appear to many of the people who are philanthropic, they feel these things are going to help a lot of people for a very long time. So that idea of transitoriness is not present when they take up such huge projects. And then finally they realize that the hospital that they build, perhaps after a few years you don't get money to run it, and then finally it has to be closed down. I have seen so many hospitals built by very rich people, and after a few years, after that gentleman or that donor passes away, these people are looking around for other people to support that hospital, to even to run it, and then in disgust they just give it free to somebody. They say we can't manage to run, and they go on expanding. So that is what Sri Ramakrishna is telling us, that these are all transient things, though it may appear to be a very good project and it may be quite sustainable for some years, but definitely it has to come to an end one day or the other. So he says all else is unreal, God is the only reality. After having been convinced of this fact, then why can't we just utilize all our energy and resources to attain to that God? And then if he decides, once you attain God, Sri Ramakrishna says there is no harm in getting involved in any kind of activity. So when he is attained, one realizes that he alone is the doer and that we do nothing. Why should we forget him and destroy ourselves with so much of work? When he is attained, hospitals, dispensaries may be built if he so wills. I say that work is only the first chapter of human life, it is not the end of life. He is repeating again. Take to spiritual practice and go forward. As you practice and advance further, you will come to know in the end that God is the only reality and all else is unreal, and that the aim of life truly is to realize God. So this is a point which he comes back to again and again. If you see the gospel, he may begin the conversation in a very light way, discussing certain simple questions asked by devotees, but then finally the answer ends with a permanent solution, that is to realize God. So that is why Mahatma Gandhi, in his beautiful introduction to his life, first biography which was published, he says his life convinces you that God alone is real and everything else is unreal, and enables you to see God face to face. That is what Gandhi wrote about him. Now to explain this, he gives a wonderful example. A woodcutter went to the forest to cut wood. This is a famous example where he says that all the stages of spiritual life, one should not be satisfied with the stage in which one is at present. One has to constantly endeavor to go further and further. So, he is giving an example, brahmachari, and deliberately he is giving the example of a brahmachari because that is the first stage of life, acquiring knowledge, acquiring the means to lead a householder's life. Then he is supposed to become a householder, and then at an appropriate time the householder's life should not continue eternally, permanently. So, that stage also has to be given up, and then you come to the vanaprastha. Vanaprastha is a preparation for the life of God, or you may say a life of renunciation, that is sannyasa, and that finally comes you after vanaprastha you come to the last stage, that is sannyasa, or that is the fourth stage. So, also there are different stages here. So, this brahmachari, he happened to meet a brahmachari, and brahmachari said to him, "My good man, go forward," because that brahmachari also was in a quest to pass through all these stages and reach the last stage of life. So, he says, "My good man, go forward." That was the only advice he gave. On returning home, the woodcutter first began to wonder why the brahmachari had asked him to go forward. So, he just goes forward. He was just happy with his wood and other things. So, since he got this advice from his guru, who was a brahmachari, he said to himself, "Today I will go forward and see. There must be some reason why he said this." So, he went deep into the forest, and to his surprise he found a lot of sandalwood trees which he would not have found if he had been content with the periphery of the forest. Then, selling it in the market, he became very rich. But even while he was doing that, the words of the brahmachari, like some mantra given by the guru, constantly reminded him, "Go forward, go forward, egiye jao." In Bengali they say egiye jao, aage jao, aage jao. So, this going forward, he went far into the forest, found a mine of silver, and because he listened to his guru and he had total faith in the words of the guru, he did not stop. That's what happens when one gets mantra diksha. The meaning of the mantra is revealed in a particular way, but if we stop at that, the full meaning is not revealed. You go on and on. You just believe in the power of the mantra to reveal itself more and more as the days pass. So, that is what happened here. The words were simple, go forward. He had not told him how forward he should go, but once he found the silver mine, he was about to be content with that, and he got plenty of wealth. He could have just stopped at that. But then suddenly he felt that in spite of getting so much money and becoming a very wealthy man, he just said, "The brahmachari did not ask me only to go to the silver mine. Otherwise, he would have told me, go up to the silver mine, first you will get this and then you will get that." But he just said, "Go forward." So, he again went forward and crossed the river, and then he came across a gold mine. And then he said, "Oh, that is why brahmachari had told me to go forward." So, the faith in Guru here and the faith in the mantra given by the Guru is exactly what Sri Ramakrishna is referring to. That there are so many things lying. That's why the song which will come to now, we'll conclude with that song. There's some time, we'll discuss this. Doob doob roop sagare. I mean, if you dive deep, it's not enough if you just have a dip in the water. If you dive deeper and deeper, you'll find so many wonderful things. You'll find gems, you'll find gold, you'll find so many of valuable treasures in the bed of the river or the sea. So, then this brahmachari's advice of going forward inspired this woodcutter, and he found that as he crossed the river, he found another heap of diamonds and jewels lying on the ground. So, this going forward made him more and more rich. So, I say that then Sri Ramakrishna is saying now, whatever you may be doing, if you go forward, you will find something better. So, stagnation is not good at any stage. If you receive inspiration after reaching a particular stage, don't think that you have come to the end. Work is not the goal of life. Go forward and you will find you will be able to work selflessly. You begin with work, that's like cutting the trees and getting wood. But if it is done with detachment, this work will yield higher results, and you may perhaps get the sandalwood. But selfless work is very difficult. So that's why we have to pray to God. Praying to God is nothing but going forward. We just go on praying, "O Lord, grant me devotion and love at your lotus feet and reduce my work." So to go forward also you have to pray to God to remove the impediments which stop you from going forward. It's a double-edged sword. It does not, if you just pray to Him, it will not work. You have to pray also to Him that the present situation is not allowing me to pray to you with love and devotion. So unless you reduce my work, so that's a good prayer which Ramakrishna is suggesting. Whatever work you give me to do, and even whatever work which is inevitable, which I have to do, grant that I may be able to do it selflessly, so that it will take me forward. If you go further, you will find God, you will have His vision, and gradually you will talk intimately with Him. The conversation now turns to the dispute about preaching in the temple of Brahmo Samaj after the demise of Keshav. Now Sri Ramakrishna knew this Pratap is involved in so many problems now, and there is a controversy now, the succession controversy which happens in most of the organizations, that Sri Ramakrishna is telling Pratap that I hear that there has been controversy with you over the pulpit. The ones who started this dispute are insignificant people. All laugh. So actually the people who are really concerned, they don't cause problems. It's the people who have nothing else to do, like Sri Ramakrishna used to say, when Rama and Shiva fought, they quickly made up with each other and then they compromised. But the monkeys and the demons of Shiva continued to quarrel. So that's what happens when great people, even if they have difference of opinion, they just settle that very quickly. But the meaner you are, the lower in the rung you are, the more the tendency is to fight over the trivials. You find it in almost every organization, in every religious or non-religious. The people at the top normally they know the importance of working together in harmony. Whereas those who are below, they don't get involved so much in the organization. So they just are happy with some kind of gossip and this gossip mongering and all those things, because they don't take seriously, they don't understand the consequences of doing all these things. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna is saying the ones who started this dispute are insignificant people, but then the repercussions are that they start it and then the fire goes upward and then there is problem. So all are laughing, because Sri Ramakrishna could see who are the people involved in this, who have nothing to do with the Brahmo Samaj, and then they cause this problem. The transition would have been very smooth. Some of the top leaders would have appointed somebody in place of Keshav, but the people at the bottom create this dispute. Then to the devotees, you see people like Pratap, Amrita and some others blow the conch shell, made a loud noise, the others produced no sound at all. I mean, they were very important people, their decisions, and Amrita and all those people, perhaps they were at the hierarchy of Brahmo Samaj. Then Pratap says, "Sir," he just makes a joke that it may be that the people at the top make more sound and they are more important, they blow the conch shell, but even a mango stone gives sound. So people, even if they don't have the conch shell, they can even make sound with the mango stone. That's the idea. So it's like Thakur actually used the word. There is a footnote here in Bengali. It is saying Hare Pela Pancha, just like Tom, Dick and Harry. These are the people who cause mischief, who practically unknown, insignificant people who should not be doing it. They do all the mischief. Now we come to that famous example which Thakur gave a few conversations earlier. He is repeating it here, especially with relation to people who preach religious truths. So he says, Brahmo Samaj and Sri Ramakrishna, instruction to Pratap. He knew Pratap will be one of those people who will be taking up the responsibility from Keshav Sen, who has just recently died. So he says, listen, hearing the lectures of your Brahmo Samaj preachers, one can very well understand the inner feeling of the people there. I mean, people go for some spiritual wealth, some proper understanding of religious truths. But Sri Ramakrishna says, when I heard one of the preachers speaking in Pandit known as Samabe, I mean, he is giving an example. They were not Brahmo preachers, but he heard a Pandit preaching in a Hari Sabha, which was so ridiculous that he says, maybe your Brahmo preachers are like that. And they, instead of removing the confusion, they are creating more confusion because they are not competent enough to preach. So he says, once they took me to a meeting at the Hari Sabha, and the preacher was a Pandit named Samadhyayi, and he made a very strange statement: the Lord has no sweetness, we have to make him juicy with our loving devotion. Then Sri Ramakrishna got terribly upset. He said, Lord, who is supposed to be the essence of bliss and joy, and how can we have the temerity to say that we should give this love to God by our devotion, as if God is a dry person and we make him loving and full of joy. So he says, I was flabbergasted to hear this and was reminded of a story. Once a boy said that his maternal uncle had a cowshed full of horses at his home. No horse is kept in a cowshed, only cows are kept there. Hearing such absurdity, what can one conclude? Just this, that there are no horses or anything else there. He is just speaking out of his imagination. He has neither seen the cowshed or neither has he seen the horse. He is not aware. He from hearsay is telling all these things. And then devotee jokes, saying, not just that there are no horses there, but there is not even a single cow. All laugh. So then Sri Ramakrishna is explaining, look, he who is the fountain of love and bliss, that's how we describe him in the Upanishads. The Taittiriya Upanishad says the nature of Brahman is Ananda, or joy supreme or bliss supreme. It was said by the man to be totally devoid of sweetness. It only shows that he has never experienced what God is. He is Rasa Swarupa. Sarasa means one full of joy or full of bliss. Rasa Swarupa, that is the fountain of bliss. And then calling such a God Niras. Niras means one who is devoid of sweetness and joy. So it says, what a ridiculous statement this person is making, because he has no experience of God. So he is giving any adjective he wants. Then the new topic is, I am the doer. The conversation is going on, but this is my house. All this is ignorance, and diving deep is the aim of life. So Sri Ramakrishna is now telling Pratap, and then he will sing this song, which we'll listen again. There's some few minutes left. Ramakrishna is telling Pratap, listen, I tell you, you are well read, intelligent and serious minded. You and Keshav were like two brothers. Perhaps he was as important as Keshav, and they were very good at the top of the hierarchy of Brahmo Samaj, like Gaur and Nitai. Gaur is Gauranga Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and Nitai is his one who did the Leela with him, Nityananda. So you have had enough lecturing, discussions, quarrels and disputes. Are you interested in these things anymore? Now he is telling him that when Keshav was there, you remember there was a split, Vijay Krishna Goswami, over small issues. And then he says, are you not tired of all these things now? You have had enough of those lecturing, discussions, and then that resulted in quarrels and disputes. Why not give up all these things? Gather your whole mind and concentrate it on God. Just jump into God. And in Bengali they say, Doob dao. Doob dao means just give a dip. It's not enough to just have a dip. Go deep below. That's the idea. Pratap is replying, yes sir, there is no doubt about that. This clearly is my duty now. But I am doing all this to preserve Keshav's name. Now that is another excuse he is giving. Then Sri Ramakrishna laughs at him, said, you say you are doing all this to keep his name alive. But after some time this spirit will not last. All this thing will go away. So listen to a story. So instead of directly criticizing him, Sri Ramakrishna is saying, a person had his house on the top of a hill. It was a small thatched house. He had labored hard to build it. After a few days there was a terrible storm. The house began to shake. The man became very worried how to save it. So naturally in Hinduism there are so many gods. So he said, Pavana Deva, the god of wind, which is known as Pavana, please do not destroy my house. But the god of wind turned a deaf ear to his words. The house began to shake violently. Then he remembered that Hanuman was the son of Pavanadeva. So if the father doesn't listen, at least let me pray to the son. So he started praying to Hanuman and said, I beseech you, but the house still shook. When he repeated, who would listen to him? When he repeated Hanuman's house so many times, he thought, because many people, I remember one incident in Rajkot, somebody came and told me that I repeat Hanuman Chalisa very regularly. It has helped me a lot. So I was wondering, I said, how did it help you? You see, many times I have to just lock my room and door and just go, and I come after so many days. There's so much of robbery all around. But by Hanuman's grace, nothing has happened to my house. So I said, do you think Hanuman is your watchman? Why do you give him that? You just put a fine lock and then take precautions. You should not be using. So this gentleman was just shouting, thinking that Hanuman will save his house. Why should he save his house? He was responsible for the destruction of the entire Lanka. So why will he be bothered about a small house of a devotee? So anyway, Hanuman's house, then he said nothing. When nothing happened, naturally God doesn't listen to such silly prayers. So, Father, it is Lakshmana's house. It is the house of Lakshmana. These two carried no weight. Then he began to call out, Father, it is Rama's house. It is Rama's. I say, Father, don't wreck it. I beseech you. Even now, nothing happened. The house began to collapse. The question now was to save his own life. Running out of the house, the man cried, it's the devil's own house. Because anyway, he has lost it. So, that shows, he just indirectly is telling him that don't bother about saving Brahmo Samaj and all. If God wills, it will be saved. Otherwise, you don't have the capacity to even save your own life, leave alone saving this organization. So, you don't have to save Keshav's name. Know that everything happens by the will of God. If it was there by God's will that he started this Brahmo Samaj, and by his will, it may be destroyed also. So, don't bother your head. And it is coming to an end by his will. You see, Sri Ramakrishna foresaw that this temporary organization will not sustain itself, because it is not based on firm foundations of God realization. So now your duty is simply to give your whole mind. But he knew, in spite of all these things, Keshav also was a very devoted man. Though social reform was part of his agenda, but basically inside his heart he also yearned for God realization. So also he knew Pratap and other people, though they are bound by all these activities and other things, deep within them there is an yearning to realize God, and that's what Sri Ramakrishna wants to awaken in everybody. That was his goal. In fact, whoever was at whatever stage, he would point out to them and finally take them to the essence of life, that is to realize God. And then to make it more, that is the method he used. That's why we also play these songs now and then. We have 10 minutes, we'll listen to this song and then try to find out what. This is a very simple song, and Thakur begins to sing a song in his uniquely sweet voice. You see, sometimes these songs, then he explains to Pratap the meaning. We'll read that also, but we'll again play this song once more. Let us just listen to this song. The meaning is given there.
ওরে ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। তলাতল পাতাল খুঁজলে, তলাতল পাতাল খুঁজলে পাবি রে প্রেম রত্ন ধন, পাবি রে প্রেম রত্ন ধন। ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। ওরে ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। ডুব 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 ডুবলে পাবি হৃদয়ে মাঝে বৃন্দাবন। ডুব 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 ডুবলে পাবি হৃদয়ে মাঝে বৃন্দাবন। দীপ 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 জ্ঞানের বাতি, দীপ 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 জ্ঞানের বাতি জ্বলবে হৃদয় অনুক্ষণ, জ্বলবে হৃদয় অনুক্ষণ। ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। ওরে ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। ড্যাং 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 ডাঙায় ডিঙে চালায় আবার সে কোন যান। ড্যাং 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 ডাঙায় ডিঙে চালায় আবার সে কোন যান। কবির বলে শোন শোন শোন, কবির বলে শোন শোন শোন। ভাব গুরুর শ্রীচরণ, ভাব গুরুর শ্রীচরণ। ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। ওরে ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। তলাতল পাতাল খুঁজলে, তলাতল পাতাল খুঁজলে পাবি রে প্রেম রত্ন ধন, পাবি রে প্রেম রত্ন ধন। ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। ওরে ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। ওরে ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন। ওরে ডুব 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 রূপ সাগরে আমার মন।
So the first two words, first two lines of this Dub 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 Roop Sagore Amar Man, Kabir, the poet, is telling that it would not do to just be superficial in your attempt to understand to realize God. So, oh my mind, the Kabir is telling his own mind, try to dive deep into the ocean of beauty, that is your Ishta, and to the deepest depths you try to descend there, and only then when you go sufficiently deep you will find the gem of love. It's not so easy. We are trying to search for that love outside. As Kathopanishad says, the senses make us look for that same prema or divine love outside, and we try to find it in smaller things. But when we don't find it, then the Guru tells you to go and find that same love. You will find it if you dive deep enough and meditate on the Ishta, who will lead you to that universal or that divine love, gem of love. So that gem is not found on the surface. of the sea. Only when you dive deep and go sufficiently deep, maybe to the bottom of the ocean, there all these gems are lying scattered. Go seek, O mind, the blessed Vrindavan within your heart. This is, of course, a person who is meditating on Sri Krishna and trying to search for him in Vrindavan, going visiting various temples and performing various rituals. So to such a person, Kabir is telling, why don't you go to the Vrindavan which is already there in your heart? You don't have to search for that Vrindavan outside. There is nothing in the gross. The gross Vrindavan was outside. The gross beauty which you see outside is not a permanent kind of beauty. Even the gross Vrindavan was there where Sri Krishna sported, but then he had to leave that gross Vrindavan and go. So the moment you leave this gross and go into more and more subtle levels of existence, subtle levels of consciousness, that is what he means when he says go deep, do amar mon. When I try to dive deep into the consciousness, which you can do only by meditating on the ever shining light of knowledge. Then in the heart, you will see in your own heart, the unceasing light of knowledge will ever shine. Deepa deepa deep, gyaner bati, jolbe ride anukkon. When it will ever shine, this unceasing light. The light which you see outside will be there for some time, but it will go. But the light which once you see that same light, the divine light within, it will shine forever. That's what he's saying. And then he gives a very strange example. Deng 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 dengai dinge chalai abar shekon John. Mane, who is that person who can steer your boat? Normally what happens is, in Bengal, if you have seen, though shallow rivers, you have to be very careful that your boat does not hit the ground below. So you have to steer the boat in such a way that it doesn't strike any rock or some soil below. But he says, who is the one who can help you steer your boat even over solid ground? That's the essence. Who is that steers the boat over the land? You have seen that boat can be easily steered in a sea, but when things become so difficult in your life, who does that? So who is that steering the boat over solid ground here means when so many obstacles come. That's when we hit the rock, when the boat is obstructed, it's not able to move smoothly. Then he says it is only your Guru who can do it, says Kabir. Listen and meditate on his holy feet. So that's the idea, that once we believe in God and repeat his holy name and dive deep enough and try to realize him in the bottom of our hearts through meditation and through japa, then all our problems will be solved. And then he tells Pratap, then we come to the end of the conversation, this today's class. He is telling Pratap, did you listen to the song? In fact, this song was sung by him, and he sang that in his sweet voice. This is one of his favorite songs, Doob 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 Roop Sagare. Enough of lectures and quarrels. Now dive deep. Diving into this sea, there is no fear of death. Now, this was a question asked by Narendra a few conversations ago. Diving into this sea, there is no fear of death. It is the sea of immortality. Don't think that it will make you lose your head. Don't think that a person becomes mad by calling lovingly on God. I said this to Narendra. Narendra was asked, he said there is a syrup or a very big syrup of immortality, and you are a fly sitting on the rim of that bowl which contains the auxiliary, the syrup of immortality. What will you do? How will you taste that? So Naren was a bit careful. He said, I'll sit on the rim and just take a sip now and then. But then Sri Ramakrishna says, why just one sip? Why can't you just take a plunge into that? You can have the whole of it. Then Naren says, no, I'll drown in it. He said, no, this is not ordinary syrup. If you just person will not, this immortality, don't think that it will make you lose your head. Diving deep into this sea, there is no fear of death. In fact, that will remove all the little fears which you have, which have their source in the fear of death which one has. So then Pratap is asking, who is Narendra? And then we come to the next conversation. We'll begin it, do it next time. The talk will be next time. So all of you perhaps are aware that we have Swami Vivekananda's birthday on 19th of, so 19th of January.